Serious? Former cult members or friends of cult members of Reddit, what is your creepiest, scariest or most disturbing story, and is that what made you leave? A friend of mine accidentally got involved with a cult in Iowa. He thought it was just a really close-knit church, but eventually snapped that something wasn't right. He moved to Texas for work pretty shortly afterwards, and after about a week of being here, someone knocked on the door. It was one of the members. She came here to try and talk him into going back, and progressively became more and more emotional. They ended up having to call the cops to have her removed from the property. I worked for a cult. It was a private school for rich kids who had addictions. There was a dynamic leader who had an inner circle of young boys who he doted on. The school itself was somewhat abusive, and trained staff like myself administering meds, and when I started, I was able to administer PRN Thorazine. As a staff member, I had to live like the students, adhere to the same rules and regs. Then they worked to distance me from my family, telling me I had an addiction. I didn't, and that it was dangerous for me to use my time off to see my family. I walked away after a few weeks because I thought I was too weak to work there. Then I went back and realized what a terrible place it was. Finally left, with a brand new eating disorder I had managed to avoid during my own adolescence. The school shut down eventually due to lawsuits from parents. The former students have a FB page, and from what I can tell, many struggle with the systematic abuse they experienced. The leader has since died, and turned out all his degrees and awards were faked. It taught me a lot about safety and services for vulnerable people. The scariest moment was the student who was actively psychotic and should have been in a lockdown facility but who was still with us. I was told to restrain him even though he wasn't fighting. He was on a hunger strike and refused to leave the building for a meeting. I had to carry him to the meeting, then restrain him the whole time. An old friend of mine is part of the Growing in Grace cult. She has a 666 tattooed on her arm and believes their leader is Jesus' second coming. He's dead now, but his followers insist he isn't. The guy was a hustler and a liar and fricked every pretty follower he encountered despite being married. My friend met him once but told me she was sad cause he didn't ask her to come back to his room. She really wanted to frick him to be near his divinity, as she puts it. The guy was gross and like 30 years her senior. I was best friends with an Olympic athlete who was into Scientology. Due to his semi-fame, he was given the VIP treatment at their Hollywood Celebrity Center, where I often accompanied him. I sat in the waiting room with the likes of Lisa Marie Presley and Giovanni Ribisi while he did his auditing sessions. When he introduced me to John Travolta at one of their celebrity events, Travolta wrapped me in a bear hug and lifted me off the ground. My friend convinced me to leave my day job and work as his personal assistant. He was doing a lot of corporate speaking appearances. I moved into his house and we lived like brothers, swimming in his pool, going to strip clubs, working out at his training gym. I had some amazing experiences like going backstage at the American Music Awards and hanging out alone with Guns N' Roses for 2 hours. The church's publicity team wanted to set him up with a girlfriend. They set up a series of dates with very cute Scientologists, but nothing really took off. We had a lot of philosophical discussions. I found many of Scientology's aspects to be very insightful, but the money grubbing and the xeno business kept me too skeptical to fall in. At one point, he made an anti-gay argument, basically saying, "Imagine carrying that to the extreme. We'd all die off." Things got creepy when he started asking me for rub-downs after his workouts. Then one night inviting me to masturbate with him. I passed. Then at a party he propositioned my gay cousin, who immediately told me, obviously I have nothing against gays, but I felt very creeped out. He was behind on paying me because he had run up huge debts for services at the church. I left and we haven't spoken since. I feel like I got closer to the inside of Scientology than any non-Scientologist ever has. I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on with Tom Cruise, you know? I would almost guarantee that. Someone from Sea Org read this. Someone figured out who you must be. Someone is now preparing to contact you. I don't know if it was a cult or not, but I grew up in a church group that was pretty close if not. My creepiest story is this. A big church that read, Controlled by fear, a lot of little churches ran a college. Read. Unaccredited brainwashing for all the little churches kids so we didn't have to go to secular school, which was pretty much considered the devil. The pastor of that big church was almost worshipped. Everyone loved him and gave him free rein to tell them what to do with their lives. I went to this college because there was really no other acceptable choice when my family was in this group. Between my freshman and sophomore year there, this pastor was convicted of fricking a teen girl he was counseling and of taking her across state lines, etc. He was later sentenced to 12 years in prison. The creepy factor is, I know for a fact that this man had keys to every door on campus and he was known to make surprise visits to the girls' dormitories. Meaning, this convicted predator had a key to my room and no one dared question him on anything. My family had been slowly on their way out for years, but this situation was the straw that broke the camel's back. Anyone remember the family radio group from a couple years back? I left because I woke up on the 22nd of May, slowly pieced my life back together. I don't think there's a lot of creepiness that happened, but mostly disturbing events. When you're raising children to believe they've been born to die and their only purpose is to get the word out, everyone's in for a fricked up ride. Your last sentence is so good. There's a cult in my town that promised that the 5th generation would be the messiahs or saviors or something, which caused the cult to breed and interbreed at extremely young and illegal ages. Actually, I should check to see what generation they are up to these days. But talk about a head trip if you are the 5th generation. Got involved with Scientology. Weirdest thing with me was that no matter what you did or said, you were wrong. I got harassed by them, asked for money. They came to my house. Followed me everywhere I went, even school. They'd just sit in the back of the lecture hall, and they videotaped me once when I was starting to back out of the religion. What I described is what they call fair game. I used to know the son of a Scientologist. He went to the church located in Washington, D.C. Apparently they dabble in a lot of authoritative hypnosis, of which he picked up on and ran from home. When I hung out with him, his parents once tried to take me to meet what's known as an auditor. Nope, nope, nope. Very fundamental church. More extreme than most. I got my FRST clue at a women's gathering when we were passing out snacks and a grown woman said to me, "Oh no, my husband doesn't allow me to eat potato chips." Allow interesting. I got more and more clues as I was there. People upset with me for reading liberal magazines, which was Reader's Digest. Then I was shunned for using worldly means for trying to lose some weight and using a diet drink mix. I was told I should be praying about it and more faith. The kicker was when the pastor's wife told me that she could tell every day where I was in my walk with Jesus spiritually because of how much makeup I was wearing that day. Yup, time to go. Disclaimer, I expect many downvotes from current members. Told this before, but I was raised a Jehovah's Witness and JW's shun former members. Most disturbing story, my 20-year-old nephew decided he didn't want to be a JW anymore and after finding himself shunned and homeless, hung himself in a friend's basement. Worst part is they'll probably use him as an example of why leaving is dangerous. Former member. Here, one day, the morning of going to said cult, my mother woke me up and tried to force dress me since I didn't feel like going. I had only gotten a few hours of sleep the night before, and I also felt slightly ill, like I had a cold, so I really wanted to stay home. After a few minutes of struggling to put ugly clothes on me, she gave up and slapped me approximately 7 times, tried to choke me, then shoved me off the bed onto the floor. She screamed at me that I would be in trouble for this rebellion, and left for the cult meeting. That's when I finally decided I had enough, and decided to leave it permanently. I had already been thinking about leaving, but this was just the final nail in the coffin. Later on, she got me a therapist for the purposes of trying to make me go to their cult meetings, crying that there was something wrong with her daughter. Lucky me, the therapist sided against her and told her to stop forcing me to go. Thankfully, she never did it again, though she lamented about me not believing anymore. This was about 7 years ago, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. In a way, it was sort of a good thing, because it opened my eyes to the world. Thank you for reading. I used to go to a super tiny, about 100 kids K-12, Catholic school. I put Catholic in quotes, because they technically weren't allowed to call themselves Catholic, because the Catholic Church thought the guy who ran it was a loose cannon. Spoilers, he was. So, they said that they were a school that taught Catholic theology. It was basically a cult. We even sometimes had prophets that were friends of the principals come and tell us about their visions. Remember the swine flu? Yeah, according to one of those guys that was going to kill a third of us all off. Q-typical, super stereotypical, fundamental ignorance about basic scientific common sense anything. We would have debates about issues for theology class sometimes. I put debates in quotes, because it was essentially rigged so that the right side would win. They made us do all sorts of fricked up stuff, too. Like, my class 1 year junior in HS had to do a retreat for a younger class, freshmen and sophomores, basically telling them that if they kissed dated they were S. They made us stand in front of PPs with those disgusting anti-abortion signs in a downtown area, something I'm still ashamed I was forced to participate in. I was naively pro-life at the time, but even then, I knew what we were doing was gross. Eventually, things spiraled out of control there to the point where the principal, for seemingly little to no reason, made it his life's mission to try and destroy mine. I can write more if people are interested. I grew up in your basic non-denominational Christian household, both parents being devout but not overly obsessive, so this is where things took a turn. My dad brought my older brother and I to this evening church service at a new location. I remember thinking it odd, even at the age of 7, that this church was being held in a dimly lit single-floor office complex. On arrival, my father brought us forward to meet the pastor and have him pray over us. This man stood over my brother and I, laid his hands on our head, and starting speaking in tongues. I know some sects of Christianity do this, yet, while he would do so, the whole room of men and women began to do the same, some falling on the floor in seizure-like fits. When this pastor finished his chanting, he spoke to my father and told him that he saw our future from God and if we remain loyal, we could do whatever we wished. He then condemned us from having any toys because now that we have been seen by God, the devil would use our toys to carry demons. That night my dad threw most all of our toys away and told us how he saw a man's face turn lizard-like that night, and we must rid ourselves of demons. The only thing that saved my brother and I from going back was my mother hearing this and forbidding us from visiting it ever again. Though my parents separated, I do believe my father returned numerous times to this church, yet, he now lives in a home doped up on many mind-numbing medications. This is the reason I ask this question. I hope you are doing better now. Thank God for your mother. Not exactly a cult per se, but it gives you a good idea of just how influential religion can be even in rational, intelligent people. My parents were heavily involved in our Christian church during my whole childhood. We're talking attending services 3-4 times a week, giving significant portions of income, etc. If you remember the church scene in Borat, that was my church, but times 10. Now don't get me wrong. The church did a lot of good for the community, but there was a lot of sinister indoctrination under the surface. When I was 15 my parents found out I'm gay, long story, and reacted poorly. They turned to the church for help. Advised by the church I was essentially shunned in my own household, not spoken to, not acknowledged, grounded from privileges, etc. Until I sought help either from a Christian psychiatrist or the higher ups at the church. I chose psychiatrist. Met this psych dude who was an ex-gay Christian. One thing that sticks with me is him saying I get it. Turning away from a sinful gay lifestyle is difficult. I did. I have been married to my beautiful wife for 6 years and I have 2 beautiful daughters. Sometimes, though, I still meet men off the internet for fricking and I then ask for God's forgiveness. Needless to say those efforts were fruitless. No pun intended. My parents lost friends over it. Their best friends from the church told them they needed to do whatever they could do to purge me of my choice. This was around the time my older brother got a tattoo, which caused problems. Also we were made to attend summertime sleepaway camps. Think Jesus Camp Light, where they tried to force us to wear hoodies that said abortion is homicide and being gay is an abomination around town. Our reluctance to comply was not received well. All these things seemed to be the straws that broke the proverbial camel's back. Soon my parents were shunned from the church, made to feel guilty and like failures. This was years ago and things are much different. but the power religions can have over rational minds is sad and sickening. TLDR. Cultish church fricked up my parents' heads. Sometimes, though, I still meet men off the internet for fricking and I then ask for God's forgiveness. Needless to say, those efforts were fruitless. No pun intended. So brilliantly out of left field. My grandfather was a French Canadian Catholic. He had 2 brothers. One of them married a Jehovah's Witness and converted. They took it all very seriously. When my mom was young, they bitched her out for sending a Christmas card. This would have been in the late 50s or 60s. Despite this, my grandpa still kept in touch cause it was his brother, even after my mom's family emigrated to the US. He went to visit them up on their farm in Canada at one point. That's when it happened. There was a farming accident involving his brother. A bad one. My grandpa made sure he got to a hospital. Upon his arrival, the doctors determined that he needed both an amputation and a blood transfusion. At this point, the brother is unconscious. The brother's wife and kids weren't there. They'd gone into town. And this was well before cell phones. It was up to my grandpa to make the call. Without hesitation, he told them to do it. His brother lived. That whole branch never talked to him again. I'm pretty sure there was never a reconciliation. I'm so glad that ended the right way. My 2 best friends are ex-Jehovah's and one of my former best friends still is. One of my friend's older siblings were physically shamed by members of the cult. When they told the elders, they tried to cover it up. My friend and his family were later kicked out, which means that aren't allowed to talk to some of their own family members that are still Jehovah's. Similar thing happened to my other best friend, but not to the same degree. The former friend and me used to be extremely close between the ages of 6-11. At 11 my family moved to another country for 3 years. When we came back he had stopped hanging out with my old clique of people, whom I stayed in contact with. Now to the fricked up thing. I was at a grocery store with one of my ex-Jehovah friends. He was never baptized and therefore can't be kicked from the cult. This means that he can still talk to members. We bump into my ex-friend's mom and he says hi and they talk for a while. During all this time, the mother doesn't talk to me at all, or even acknowledge that I'm there. She also hides from my mom if they happen to be in the same place. I assume that it's because she realized that she's not going to be able to recruit us into her fricked up cult. The ex-friend is and has always been very sheltered and all he knows is Jehovah, which is a shame seeing as he is incredibly clever and the cult limits his options greatly. When we were small he wasn't allowed to be in the Ray classes with us because of his religion. TLDR. Jehovah's is a fricked up cult. I've had some good times talking to JW missionaries, but that's because they usually send me an elder the second time around, because I can explain why their god's name isn't actually Jehovah. One time, I sent said elder back to their kingdom hall with a question that apparently nobody else had a good answer to. The missionaries stop showing up when you make their elders doubt. In college, I got involved in a Christian campus ministry my freshman year. My junior year I decided I was agnostic and left the ministry. About 6 months later, I started dating this girl. One day, about 2 months into our relationship, she comes over in tears. Turns out one of the staff members of this ministry had sought her out and told her a bunch of bullcrap about how I'm not a good guy, how I don't treat women with respect and that she should be really careful around me. This girl wasn't involved with any Christian organization and was agnostic like me. They literally had to stalk my Facebook account, find out who she was, then somehow ran into her at a coffee shop. She was more distraught that someone had basically stalked her and didn't believe the stuff they said for a second. They'd done stuff like this before too. Them are some freaking Pisces. I went to a non-denominational church for a very short period of time that I believe was a cult. In the back of the church there was a small hallway behind the altar. On one wall there was a low bookshelf that was full of Benny Hinn videos. In the middle of the hallway there was a smaller hallway that led up to 2 bathrooms on the left and a little room on the right, probably used for Bible study or whatever else. I was back there in that hallway one night and the bathroom door was open with the light off. It contained a light bulb that hung from the ceiling. I kid you not, that thing flickered on by itself. That's probably the creepiest thing I saw while there. I only went a few times but it was pretty messed up. They said I had demons oppressing me and living inside my body. I had to get counseling from several different church ministers afterward just to deal with that. Plus there was this pressure to get people to join the church and weird dream stories people had all of the time. I remember walking in one day and seeing a chalkboard and written on it was, "Friends don't let friend go to heck." I also remember one person talking about how they had a dream that everywhere around the town that we lived in it was demons fighting and torturing people, and how the only peace could be found inside the walls of the church. The worst sin according to them was speaking against charismatic gifts or miracles. Even joking about that sort of thing, such as playfully touching someone on the head and saying, "Be healed," put you in danger of blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Basically, if you said that any of the tongues or healings they did wasn't real or made fun of it, you were going to heck. Yeah, it was seriously weird. I left after only a few visits, so it wasn't that hard for me to leave. I left because I realized they had very bad theology mixed with ignorance and probably didn't know what they were really doing. My cousin is still involved in Scientology. She lives inside of Sea Org while working for them. She has been a secretary there for over 7 years and is in her early 20s. Her mother cannot talk to her or send letters to her without it being intercepted and discussed on the grounds of how it will affect her focus on the greater good of her being. Once in a rare while my aunt will call and get her daughter at the desk and just have enough time to say "I love you." Now my said cousin's father is heavily involved and has been since the earlier days of its establishment. My mom remembers the day he joined in California. A car drove up beside him as he was walking down the street and a woman got out and said, "Do you have any real friends? Are you happy with yourself as a person? You seem lonely." She handed him a pamphlet and he went to the church that same day. He was then audited to see what level thetan he was. "Look this crap up, it's crazy," he once told my mom, whom had just cut herself while working at a frame shop together, to go back and try to cut herself again. His reasoning? No two same things can happen in this world. He also told my mom that he and other members of the church were going to make this guy's life heck for leaving. They would find out whenever he got a new job and relentlessly call him all day from different numbers. They even went as far as to write complaints. My uncle also has said that having a child is a bad act that oppresses your spirit, and that conceiving is to allow an evil thetan to trick your good thetan over into the world we live in now. He explained this is why most adopt in Scientology or join after having children, because their thetan level is so strong it led them to stop their children from doing so. Yet he had kids after converting. It's incredibly sad and I wish I was making this up. My parents thought about being super fundamentalist Christians at one point, so they went to some seminars by Bill Goddard. I think that was his name. Not exactly a cult, but they are super conservative fundamentalists who believe in homeschooling kids and crap. I remember thinking it was really freaking weird because in the kids program they made people raise their hands a certain way. You had to raise one hand while supporting it with the other hand. So one hand is up vertically and you had to hold the other hand horizontally under it to support it and make an L shape basically. As a normal kid who went to school with normal people, I thought this looked retarded. That's when I knew something about that place was not right. A close family member of mine is a part of a small church, but everyone in the family is positive it's a cult. His wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and did no treatments because the church told her God would cure her. Of course, she got more and more sick and was in a lot of pain. The leaders told her that the devil was inside her and that they needed to pray every day. Eventually it spread and her face and neck swelled up so much you couldn't recognize her. Then the pastor was nutty enough to tell my family member, her husband, that he had a dream that she was going to be cured and get better, that God told him so. 2 days later she died. My whole family hates this church so much for giving false hope and talking her out of getting any treatments. My close family member is still with his church and has donated thousands to them. It's so sad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.